Thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy and everyone who supported me.
I've expressed in the past that I am a huge fan of indie games and platformers in general. Well, it seems that the company known as Yacht Club Games has released the perfect combination of the two, Shovel Knight. This game has tight controls, gameplay that perfectly blends things like Mega Man, Zelda 2, and DuckTales, and music composed by the musical genius that is Jake Kaufman. But to me, the best things in the entire game are, similarly to Mega Man's Robot Masters, the knights that you must fight throughout the entirety of the game. Each of these knights have their own unique and interesting qualities that set them apart from each other, such as great music, awesome patterns that'll tickle your brain, and an overall sense that you can complete it in various ways. In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons I love the bosses in this game. While I do completely love Mega Man's system of one certain weapon being used on certain Robot Masters, I really enjoy Shovel Knight's system more. You don't need a weapon to defeat the bosses. Hell, a lot of them are easier if you simply attack them with a shovel. It's things like that that really make the knights a thrill to fight. Also, I would like to point out that I enjoy fighting all the bosses in the game to an extent, but I do find flaws with some of them. Still, I can say with absolute certainty that there is not a single boss in this game that I did not like to fight. Just thought I'd get that out of the way. One more thing. The whole reason this is a top 9 is because I'm only including the main knights who fight in the stages, and I don't include the enchantress to be a knight. That's why, as much as I love Baz Knight, I didn't really feel like it was fair to include him. But with all that out of the way, let's get started. Steal thy shovel! After completing the first stage and visiting the village, you are put onto a map screen for the first time and given 2 options to go to. A giant welcoming castle, or a huge looming death lair. I know that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you get my point. I might be the only one who did this, but I've seen a lot of people go to King Knight's castle as their first real stage, and I can honestly see why. First, let's look at the positives. King Knight's music, both the stage and boss battle itself, are phenomenal. In fact, that can go for the whole game. I can easily see myself listening to this game's music outside of the game itself. Also, the level design is ingenious. There are various enemies in the stage that reflect on the castle-y feel. Knights in armor, giant banners, and crowns are just a few of the features to be found inside. Another thing I absolutely adore are the giant pots that try to drown you in a sea of lava. It seems to really show the power of King Knight, however ironic that might be due to his initial weakness. The enemy placement is also very fair, giving you enough time to react quickly, but also enough time to reflect and enjoy the designs of the creatures themselves. It honestly just goes to show you the competency of the designers.
But this is where the level takes a sharp spiral down.
King Knight is by far the least difficult knight in the entire game. First going through his level actually gave me quite a bit of trouble, and I died on a constant basis. However, I kept at it and was finally able to get to him. Going in, he seems like a huge threat that will be very difficult to take down. However, there is a very simple pattern that you can use to kill him. All you really have to do is jump a lot and keep hitting him with your downward shovel strike. And it's a shame that the battle is so short because he really does have some creative attacks. For instance, if you are too close to him, he will strike you a number of times with his scepter and make a horizontal swing towards you and base his attacks around that. Similarly, if you pull a pansy strike and stay too far away from him, King Knight uses giant horns to launch confetti into the air that is very hard to avoid, but in a very enjoyable way. It's also a very big shame due to the fact that his track is one of the most exciting and enjoyable in the whole game.
Overall, I really think it would have worked in King Knight's favor if this battle had been a little more difficult to beat. It would have made the battle a lot more intense and, well, I would have been able to enjoy the awesome beat a lot more. I do like this fight, but for me, it ends in about a minute. If it weren't for that, it would have been a lot higher.
Ever hear the saying, so hard that it's fun? That sums up Plague Knight in a nutshell. Plague Knight's stage is full of things things that you'd expect to see in the Plague of the Renaissance. Giant vials filled with elixir, tons of rats, and magic people.
Hey, they believed a lot of different things back then.
I actually do consider Plague Knight's stage to show more of what his character traits are. It is set up in such a way that you know he's going to be a challenge, but not in an unfair way. Well, that's actually what, in my opinion at least, drags Plague Knight down. His stage has one of the primary problems that King Knight's stage had. It builds up Plague Knight up to be a very difficult challenge, and that just isn't the case. He is harder than King Knight by a noticeable amount, but he still doesn't serve a testament to his stage. Because honestly, Plague Knight's stage is probably the most frustrating one in the entire game. But does that make it a bad stage? Well, yes and no. While it was a little disappointing to me how easy Plague Knight was compared to his stage, it was immensely satisfying to take out all your aggression from the stage on him. Through all the cheap deaths he put you through, to easily dispatch him is so much fun. But I haven't actually described the level or him themselves. Plague Knight's level is one of the most creative ones in the entire game, even straying out of its own category to be unique. And honestly, that's a good thing. Without things like the cogs, the various treasures lying around, and the huge flaming pits, I don't think it would have had the same appeal that it does in the final product. Also, sticking with the plague-esque environments, there are rats everywhere. Exploding rats, flying rats, and rats that are just there to hang out. And while at the time I did complain about it as the flying rats are very reminiscent of the fucking Medusa heads in Castlevania, looking back, I think it's a rather smart and intellectual thing to include. You see, the Black Death of the 18th century was caused in a majority by the fleas coming in on rats. So to include that in the plague stage shows that the designers do know what they are talking about. And while it is quite easy, the boss fight is very creative. Plague Knight's attacks consist of things that have to do with science. Vials filled with liquids, exploding bottles, and fiery traps are just some of the things that Plague Knight will do to try to kill you. And that death sequence, oh, it's so awesome.
While not being the most difficult boss in the game, Plague Knight definitely proves himself as not only a badass, but also a humble servant to the Enchantress. If only he could keep up with the others.
I don't know why, but I've always been fascinated with the paranormal. I don't know if I'm just weird or if I'm crazy, but it's always just been this other world for me, which is probably one of the reasons I love Luigi's Mansion so much. But I'm getting off topic. You know how earlier I said that once you beat the first level there are 2 places available to visit? Well, the second one just so happens to belong to Spectre Knight.
Oh no, it's a ghost! It's scary!
Spectre Knight is one of the most badass battles in the entire game. Everything a boss should do, it does, and well. He's intimidating, it's just the right amount of difficult, and his design is creative enough to motivate you to beat him. His stage also hits right out of the ballpark, bringing in the whole dead feeling perfectly. And I'm not joking there, it's like there was a ghost filter code while developing the game, and they turned it up all the way. There are giant skeletons, smaller skeletons that can be used as extra jumps, ghosts, hidden passageways, all the things you would expect to find in a haunted mansion. No, not you, but soon. You can also expect to find lots of lightning and effects that make the whole level pop.
But ironically, while the boss and stage usually complement themselves, it works completely differently here. Why? Because the boss is fucking awesome!
The battle with Spectre Knight is easily the best thing about the whole stage. Let me tell you about my first impressions with him. When I first came into the arena, I wasn't expecting much. The stage isn't very hard to get through, and since I had just beaten King Knight, I felt unstoppable. However, just a few seconds into the battle, and I knew I was incorrect. Spectre Knight appears in a big flash of lightning and holds out a scythe that just adds to the notion that he looks like death himself. He's also able to teleport all around the stage while it's still attacking you by throwing his scythe at you. And his scythe is honestly his greatest asset. It's very hard to avoid, but presents a challenge that is completely possible and honestly rather fun to deal with. It gave me an actually pretty tough time, and I considered quitting multiple times, but I was stopped by the fact that each time I got better and better. I would chip his health down more and more, getting closer and closer, and eventually I managed to defeat him. The feeling was extremely gratifying, and I felt completely fulfilled and ready to tackle the next foe.
That feeling is why I love not only this boss, but this game, and also Spectre Knight. He's awesome. But it was only ruined by one thing.
I went back to fight him in the New Game Plus mode and found he was really easy. Although that might just be because I had better armor. No matter, this boss is still incredibly fun and I look forward to facing him in future playthroughs. I've always loved flying. It gives me a sense that I'm on top of the world and that nothing can stand on my way. Even though I now know the immense danger that flying presents, I still get a huge joy from it. So imagine my delight when I find video games I can fly in. DC Universe Online, Infamous Second Son, and of course, Shovel Knight. Well, to be honest, Shovel Knight himself can't fly, but it's with the use of an item he gets from Propeller Knight. And what do you know, it's a hell of a lot of fun. Propeller Knight's stage is one of the most treacherous and difficult, which is very enjoyable for me. I love a good challenge, and Propeller Knight's stage completely encapsulates that feeling. And of course, going with the rest of the game, there are many things that you'd expect to find in the sky. Fast-moving winds, and actually, that's it. That's actually one of the reasons I love this stage. It's very different from your typical Shovel Knight level, because besides the wind, there's nothing that has to do with the sky here. Floating and electricity jellyfish spikes and flying rats are present here. Imagine trying to navigate a plane through this clusterfuck. You die in an instant! But of course, our little knight takes it on like it's nothing. Jellyfish? Jump on them! Rats? Jump on them! Spikes? Actually, don't jump on them, that's a bad idea.
But you shouldn't do that in any game, because remember, in video games, player plus spikes equals death. It's a simple equation, really.
The music to this stage is also simply ear candy. It really represents the feeling of being in the air, but also with some perils in the way. I'm sorry, I just can't kiss Jake Kaufman's ass enough. Unfortunately, it's a strange case here, as the stage is marginally better than the boss, because honestly, Propeller Knight's battle isn't much to remember. All he basically does is fly around, summon cannibals, and try to stab you. Use a combination of the throwing anchors, your shovel, and he'll be taken down easily. However, I still do love this boss, as if for no other reason than the fact that it's in the air. That might be biased, but it's my opinion. Ah well, it still is fun to fight, and that's all that really matters in the end. Propeller Knight, cool stage, okay boss. That's all I can really say. Oh, besides this, Shovel Knight's people really seem to like rats. Like, an unhealthy amount. Maybe they should go to rehab. Nah, that'd be stupid. You know what's really annoying in almost every game ever? Lava. Lava is found in pretty much every platformer in existence, and I'm not sure if there's ever been an instance where it's been done right. Oh wait, I forgot about Mole Knight! This guy did something that I didn't even think was remotely possible. He made a fun lava/fire stage. And I know that I say this a lot sarcastically, but I completely mean it when I say I will let you recover from the shock. Mole Knight to me is like the middle ground of Shovel Knight. Both the boss and the stage are equally enjoyable. But since you have to go through it first, let's talk about the stage. Mole Knight's stage is accompanied by many things you'd usually expect to find in a huge volcano. And one touch of the stuff will have you finding yourself in death. But it's implemented in places where it's very easy to avoid and completely fair.
The best example I can think of this is Mega Man. Remember the spikes in main series Mega Man games? Remember how annoying and frustrating those were? Well, it's almost the polar opposite here.
However, since this game does take a huge portion of its inspiration from Mega Man, there are certain places where it can be irksome. But that mostly comes in areas where you're encouraged to use the item of the stage, the Dust Knuckles. And wow, for being such a hot place, you wouldn't expect this much dust. There are dirt blocks everywhere that you either need to fist your way through or simply avoid it altogether. But it's not in places where you're required to have it. The dust usually just leads to extra spoils like gems or health. Just little things that encourage you to buy the item. The enemies are also very fire heavy. They include flame slimes, giant flame beasts, or just obsidian walls that you need to get through. However, one of my favorite platforming elements from any game ever comes from this stage. There's a part where you need to get over some lava, but lucky for you, there is a moving bug platform. Now you can take the more direct route and simply ride them all the way and occasionally breaking a block, or you can actually try to break everything and get as many gems as possible. That's a really creative way of getting you to explore without directly telling you to to do it.
Don't you love it when video game developers actually respect your intelligence? It's a wonderful feeling.
Mole Knight himself is also a pretty fun fight. He has various attacks that really remind me of Fireman. He can throw giant obsidian or dirt blocks at you that you must cut through. If you don't, it pushes you all the way to the wall and deals some serious damage. He also will, at different points of the fight, dig underground and make you try to find him. If you do, you dig him up and have a chance to attack and give him some more damage. If you don't, he jumps out of the ground and shoots fire all over the arena. And then, to add to that, after that, he shoots even more fire. He will also dash all around the place on his stomach, desperately trying to hit you. And if he does manage to get you, he hurts you an insane amount. Like a bunch of health will go down.
Also, he's really fat. It's so cute. Oh, hey, fatty! Hey, you cute little Got it. Don't insult him.
Mole Knight all around is just a great boss. His attacks will leave you wondering and always make you wonder what he'll do next. Just make sure not to insult him. He doesn't take kindly to that. Ah! Motherfucker! I want to ask you a serious question. Who among us didn't dream of one day growing up and going hunting for treasure? No? Only me? Okay, well, it still stands. And the one place I always thought I'd find interesting and wondrous things was in the ocean. Enter Treasure Knight. Treasure Knight is the boss of this game's water level. However, rather crazily, it's a good water level. Yeah, even though most games' water stages make me want to choke kittens, Shovel Knight somehow finds a way to make it work. What's actually kind of odd about Treasure Knight's stage is the fact that there aren't any jellyfish here, in the ocean. Okay, so jellyfish can be found in the sky, but in the ocean, where it would make sense, they don't appear. Alright then. Even with the apparent absence of jellyfish, this is still one phenomenal stage. There are certain things that could be found in an underwater environment, such as Stingray, but that's not where the best in this level are found. No, the best thing about this level are its creative platforming element, more specifically the falling anchors. There is a part of this level where there are anchors falling from the ceiling, and you have to jump onto them when they are coming back up. There's a rather annoying thing trying to kill you in the form of a sorcerer, and it all just comes together to make something really creative.
These platforming bits are probably my favorite things in the entire game, or any game for that matter. It's incredibly well designed and different from normal ones. Just don't jump on anchors in real life, kids. That'll hurt your feet.
The entertainment doesn't stop there, though. There are several other things in the stage that are fun to dispatch. One of the best things from this stage is the fact that gravity isn't randomly increased just, well, for because. In other games of this type of genre, your simple jump makes you fly into the air without any restrictions, oftentimes hitting your head on things like death blocks or spikes. Especially spikes. What is it with games and loving spikes? No one likes spikes, they're annoying!
But, being bursts of anger aside, Treasure Knight is a total joy to kill.
For starters, he really looks like something out of Bioshock, like a Big Daddy's half-brother. Only difference is that he takes the whole treasure vibe and goes through the roof with it. As soon as you walk in, you can see literal mountains of treasure just stacked throughout the background. But don't think he doesn't take advantage of it because, oh boy, it's his primary attack. He will use his anchor hand to grapple all over the place and then come slamming down at the ground, sending piles of treasure flying at you. Oh, and make sure to avoid it because one hit of it sends your life bar packing. However, it is evened out by the fact that your jump is increased, but only for this battle. That means if you time it just right, you can soar over the piles of treasure and actually hurt him a bit. He also takes full advantage of his anchor hand, as he will sometimes stay in one place and just shoot it at you. It's one of his easier attacks, sure, but it's a really creative design choice that adds to the enjoyment you get while fighting him.
Honestly, I think the tagline for this level should have been Treasure Knight, Anchor Guy.
Treasure Knight is one of the more creative knights in the game, but it's held back by the fact that he doesn't have much of a backstory. Still, I continue to love not only him, but his stage. Anchors away!
God, that was terrible.
You know what's actually kind of surprising to me? My genuine love of ice levels. Yeah, while many people continue to hate these types of stages as the mechanics are slippery, get it? And they oftentimes just end up being a bad time, I actually find lots of enjoyment here. Even the ice-themed places in Zelda, where it's reported to be its worst. So it's honestly no surprise that the ice level makes its way onto this list high up with Propeller Knight. One of the best things about Propeller Knight is the speculation surrounding him. Before you actually begin the battle, he and Shovel Knight talk about the times they've spent together in the past, and that's one of the reasons I find it so enjoyable. If Shovel Knight and Propeller Knight are talking, that means that they must have met in some sort of friendly environment in the past, which is really intriguing to me. The thought that they have to fight, even though they had to have been friends at one point, just adds to the tension of the battle. And oh boy, the thing itself is great. Propeller Knight, being the icy guy, will center his attacks around that notion. He shoots blocks of ice and can make spikes rain down from the ceiling. He also takes complete advantage of his shovel, as if you try to do your downward thrust onto his head, he will attack you with the shovel itself and make you fall over. He also really seems to enjoy using giant rolling snowballs, as it is one of the things he does most often. Also, in pattern with the stage, there is a time once you get far into the battle where Propeller Knight will make spikes appear on the floor by smashing into it. The only way to avoid the spikes is to actually stand on them, but with the snow you can jump on, blocking the damage. It's a really intriguing battle, to say the least.
Now you might have noticed that I went a little out of order because I talked about the boss first. Well, that's because the stage is easily the best part.
Propeller Knight's stage is composed of ice, of course, and has the before-mentioned spikes with snow. But for once, the enemies all reflect completely on what the stage has to offer. Snowy wolves, ice sorcerers, and evil spear-throwing cavemen are just some of the stage's powerful arsenal. Along with that, the ice mechanics here are turned up to 10, as there are cliches up the butt here, especially with the sliding floors. They really went crazy with that aspect. But unlike most ice levels, the slippery floors aren't found in places where it can easily lead to cheap deaths, no. Instead, it is only implemented in areas where it makes the platforming more difficult.
But once again, I need to stress that it's not unfair at all, because of the tight controls. If you fuck up, it's on you!
Propeller Knight honestly wouldn't be this high if it weren't for his very short but interesting talk with Shovel Knight predating the battle. Added on to that is the amazing stage, and I haven't even gotten a chance to mention the music. This is one of the tracks not composed by Jake Kaufman, and actually made by the composer of the music for the original Mega Man. And even though I love Jake to death, I can't get enough of this song. I know that a lot of people do this, but please listen to this awesome song. Can't get enough of Propeller Knight. Nothing could beat him. Wait a minute. I'm not even going to bother building this up. It's Tinker Knight. Yup, Tinker Knight's my second favorite knight in the whole game. But why? I mean, look how small he is. And you can kill him with one hit. Why would this pathetic battle be on hit?
Oh. Fuck. That's a huge bitch!
And holy shit, everything about him is amazing. Let's start with his stage. Tinker Knight's stage reflects him perfectly. There are metal workings everywhere around this place, such as metal saw blades and swords, and I love it so much! There also seems to be a running theme with things that you have to jump on that move. There are moving platforms in perfect platformer logic, but there are also a bunch of cogs that move back and forth. You have to downward thrust on them to get to the other side, then do the same thing to get back. It's a very creative setup, but let's get to the very obvious part about this battle, the boss. Tinker Knight is the perfect amount of difficult, and just the right amount of intimidating to warrant him being this high. His attacks range from things like giant missiles you have to jump on, to giant circles. Basically, this guy only works with one style, gargantuan.
Seriously, Tinker Knight goes from being one of the weakest and easiest things in the entire game to a giant hulking machine. Tiny soda? Nah, I'll have a big soda. Tiny fork? Nah, I'll have a big fork. Necronomicon, the book that is all unholy and evil? Nah, I'll have the Bible.
I also happen to love Tinker Knight's design, being made out to look really scrawny and small at first, but then having the big reveal of his final form. It really goes to show you that smaller things can get bigger.
What? I'm just saying the truth. Smaller things over time or when provoked will get... Oh, you sick fucks.
I honestly love this guy, but there was no doubt in my mind who number 1 should be. And Tinker Knight, as much as I love him, didn't make the cut. So, let's take a look at the best of the best.
If you've played Shovel Knight, then you probably have figured out through process of elimination who I consider to be the best. But if you haven't, allow me to tell you. I consider the best knight in the entire game to be the Black Knight. And that's not racist at all.
Now, before you go screaming at me, yes, I do know that Black Knight technically doesn't have his own stage dedicated to him, but I do count the first level as a stage. Yeah, Black Knight is in the first stage and is set up as sort of the tutorial boss, but he still manages to make it really good. You fight him twice, so let's go over both fights. The first one is found in level 1, and it's about as basic as it gets. Black Knight is the exact same as you, but just a different color. He has very similar attacks, and everything seems to reflect around the things you and him share. The only real difference is the attack where he shoots a purple blast of energy at you and does some serious damage. The second boss is very similar to the first, but he's made more difficult by the fact that he has some more moves and more health. But it's not really his battle that makes him the best in my eyes. No, I think the best thing about Black Knight is his story.
But just to clarify, I do like his battle. Just to get that out of the way.
You see, the story of Shovel Knight goes that once long ago, Shovel Knight and his love Shield Knight roamed the land together. But one day at the Tower of Fate, Shield Knight supposedly lost her life. However, you do find out near the end of the game that she was actually transformed into the Enchantress. Well, it turns out that Shovel Knight wasn't the only one who was in love with Shield Knight, because as you go through the game, you find out that Black Knight was too in deep love with Shield Knight, and knows she is the Enchantress, which is why he so desperately tries to protect her. In each battle with the Black Knight, he briefly touches upon his love for Shield Knight. Hell, in one of them, he tells her that her safety is the only important thing to him. At the end of the game, Shield Knight comes out of the Enchantress, and you and her fight the Enchantress as the final boss. In the ending part of the game, Shield Knight is blocking the Enchantress's blast, and Black Knight runs him. He tells her to get down, fearful she'll lose her life again. She tells him to take Shovel Knight and get out, and in his love, he does just that.
That's why I like Black Knight the best. Even though he loves her, he will do whatever she wants, even if she dies. That selflessness is so admirable.
Black Knight truly does love her, and throws in some battles that are extremely fun just for good measure. He is, and always will be, my favorite knight in Shovel Knight.
I'm Blackish Butler, and Shovel Knight is one of my favorite games of all time.
Oh, and Shield Knight gets out. Just thought I'd let you know.